Justine, thank you very much indeed for that introduction. Conference, let me start today with a question to you. Here is the scenario. You have just been appointed Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families. Congratulations. The education job is surely the job that every Liberal Democrat dreams of. And you're also, in this particular scenario, best mates with Gordon Brown. Okay, that's not something that every Liberal Democrat would dream of, nor apparently David Miliband, Charles Clarke, and it's quite difficult to keep up with the others. But you have been given a unique opportunity to change the lives of children in this country for the better. So what would you do? Press Gordon Brown to secure a massive increase in investment for our poorest children? Well, Ed Balls didn't do that. Start setting schools free from the tangle of Whitehall bureaucracy? Well, Ed Balls didn't do that either. Instead, our Secretary of State has reverted to what he really is, a backroom wheeler and dealer, absorbed by Gordon Brown's future instead of that of the children he's meant to serve. And meanwhile, this government's education strategy has become so authoritarian that it's beyond parody. The Whitehall screwdriver reaches down ever further into every school in the land. A 10-year plan, a talent task force, compulsory cooking, mandatory culture, and now even a national play strategy. Since 1997, we've been force-fed 14 education bills, 370 consultation papers, and over 1,600 new parliamentary regulations. That's one new education measure every 2 days. Well, as Liberals, we have a message for Mr. Brown and Mr. Balls, a message that the great Conrad Russell so often delivered from here. Centralised power is not rendered beneficial by the good intentions of those who wield it. And our task now as Liberal Democrats is to deliver a blistering defence of real freedom in education and to marry this with our most ambitious ever proposals to end the educational apartheid between the rich and the poor in this country. The part of my job which I relish most is visiting schools. But in our schools, I also encounter the saddest and most shameful aspects of our society today. The children who have been left behind and who simply never catch up. The children whose families are either too poor or too chaotic to offer them the support they need. The children for whom school is the one safe port in a sea of troubles. And when you come across a child, age, say, 7 or 8, with all their optimism, energy, and enthusiasm, you want to have a sense of all the great potential that lies ahead. Success at school, a family, a good job, a life of opportunities. But from birth, these children's life story is already being defined in terms of low achievement, limited job prospects, and the spectre of crime and drugs. In no other country is it harder for poor children to succeed. Of every 10 poor boys, 8 will leave school without decent qualifications. Indeed, poor children in our country are only half as likely to succeed as the children who speak English only as a second language. And a society that can look at a child at age 7 and know that he or she is condemned to failure is neither liberal, nor free, nor fair. It should be the central mission of the Liberal Democrats to end this great injustice. And we have long campaigned for a party for more funding for education. That's why we fought for the 1p extra on tax for schools, while many opposed it and until it was delivered. And at last year's conference, you took the next big step. You voted for a pupil premium of £1.5 billion to help the poorest pupils. Now, I may not normally be known for for my support for lots of extra public spending. But I was delighted that in his leadership election, Nick Clegg increased that commitment to £2.5 billion because that would bring the funding for 1 million of the poorest children up to the average level in private schools. And the pupil premium would make a real difference in tackling disadvantage. Just think what it could mean. Private school funding levels would allow the most disadvantaged schools to deliver for their pupils what only private schools can take for granted. Longer teaching hours, Saturday openings, small class sizes, and the resources to attract the best teachers. And we're already looking at whether we can identify further savings within the department's budget, which would allow us in time to increase the pupil premium up to £5 billion so that other disadvantaged pupils can benefit too. By the way, conference, I would like to congratulate you all, because since last year, you've won another convert to this policy, the Conservative Party. They say now that they're considering introducing a pupil premium as part of their new commitment to fighting poverty. But the Conservative Party only believes in tackling poverty up to the point at which it has to blow off the dust and open up its wallet. Because when it comes to spending priorities, the only solid commitment that they've made so far is to spend £1 billion cutting inheritance tax for estates of up to £2 million. And after all David Cameron's talk of tackling breakdown Britain, we discover that the truth about the Conservative Party is that reductions in inheritance tax for the very rich will take priority over the most important inheritance of all, our children. What a contemptible set of priorities that would be for Britain. Nor does the Conservative Party offer a real prospect of escaping from the centralised education which has suffocated schools for 20 years. After all, the nationalisation of English education was completed by Kenneth Baker in 1988. It is now not enough for teachers to just achieve the desired outcomes. These must be delivered in prescribed ways and exercised in central control, not seriously contemplated in Europe since the fall of the Soviet bloc. And all this bureaucracy and targeting is now to be extended into every preschool and every nursery, as Annette Brooke has so effectively highlighted. Ed Balls runs our education system as if it was still one of the great nationalised industries of the last century. But from the poshest public schools to the toughest maintained schools, there's a new consensus that standardisation and centralisation just don't work. That what's needed is more independence, more real freedom for schools, an Education Freedom Act, an act to give power back to schools, back to local government, and back to parents. The huge Whitehall department should be cut back dramatically. No school should in the future be directly accountable to ministers, and no school should ever again have to write a grovelling letter to the Secretary of State seeking his permission to be creative. Academies presently have these freedoms to innovate, and in the future, all schools should have them. As for the 635 pages of our nationalised curriculum, these could usefully go in the shredder, and let us replace them with something closer to the 21 pages that seem to do the job quite well in places such as Sweden. And on cash, let us devolve to the maximum, down from Whitehall to the Town Hall and down further to schools. There should be no question of a return to the secret garden of the 1970s, but the existing system just won't wash. There are now too many tests, and there's too much teaching to the test. Consider, after all, the shambles of this year's key stage tests. All that work in all of those schools, and yet some of the tests have not even yet been marked and returned 4 months after they were taken. What an insult that is to all those people who worked so hard on those tests. And our message is that you cannot justify high-stakes testing if you've got low-quality marking. The government, of course, is in a state of denial about all this. You probably remember how while the Titanic sunk, the band played on. If Ed Balls were on the Titanic, he would be the conductor of that band. And so let us give the conductor some advice. The key stage 3 tests don't need a new contractor, they don't need a fresh makeover, they need to be scrapped here and now. And with greater freedom for schools, inspection is vital. But Ofsted should be a government watchdog and not a government lapdog, not just ticking off government targets, but giving a real evaluation of a school's all-round performance and constructive advice on improvement. We should sweep away the quangos and establish an independent educational standards authority to hold all schools and local authorities to account. We need an education system which delivers not just freedom for schools, but real choice for parents and real opportunity for every single child. And that must mean a high-quality school for every community. We know what now makes for these great schools. It's not just money, it's a strong head teacher, excellent staff, good discipline, and high aspirations. Let me tell you about one of the best schools that I've ever visited, the Phoenix High School in West London. It's a local authority comprehensive school, but there is nothing bog standard about this school. In 1994, it was one of the worst schools in the whole of England. Most of the pupils there are on free school meals, and turnover is a third of the pupils every single year. And if there is a school in a neighbourhood where children would be too hard to teach, this would be it. But a brilliant head teacher, Sir William Atkinson, and his superb staff have turned this around. Their results are now above the national average. Sadly, not all schools are like Phoenix High School. Some have languished for decades, betraying generations of pupils, and others just coast along. For those worried about reforming our system, I start by saying just look at the school system that we've got at the moment. The rich can choose the private schools, others, usually the more affluent, choose grammar schools, others exercise choice by buying a house in the best catchment area or suddenly discovering strong religious convictions. Only the poor have little or no choice. And if you were starting from scratch, it would hardly be possible to design a system that more effectively embeds inequality than this. And the result, in our richest communities, almost no school fails the government target for GCSE passes. But in our poorest communities, most of the schools find that over 7 in 10 children leave without the basic minimum set of exam results. That is the education system that the Tories and this government have presided over, and both should be deeply ashamed of it. But now, from the top comprehensive schools to the best new academies, schools are showing that you can break the link between social class and educational performance. Look at Mossbourne Academy in Hackney. Exactly like the Phoenix, it replaced a notorious school, Hackney Downs, dubbed the worst school in the country in the 1990s. It's now recorded the highest value-added scores in the country at age 14. The best schools in the toughest neighbourhoods are no longer accepting mediocrity as their fate, and nor should we. The government has, of course, done its best to give educational reform a bad name. There's much to put right. 400 academies can't be run from one ministerial office, and the freedoms granted to academies can no longer be denied to other schools. And local authorities should no longer be bullied and bribed as they have been. Instead, the strategic oversight of all state-funded schools should be returned to local government. And in turn, local authorities must embrace their new role as purchasers of education, not merely providers. A blind eye can no longer be turned to failure or mediocrity, as it so often has been in the past in Labour's rotten boroughs. So let us be imaginative and liberal in the way we address educational failure. This party has never believed that the state has a monopoly of wisdom. Last year, we voted the brilliant John Stuart Mill as our best ever Liberal. And I apologise to Paddy Ashdown for that. I would have voted for him if he'd been up there. And Mill was a passionate advocate of free education, but he was also a passionate opponent of all monopolies. And in that great classic work on liberty, he argued that improvement and progress in a free society could only be guaranteed by experimentation and diversity, not by central diktat. And I agree with Mill. If federations, twinning with successful schools and other interventions can work, great. If universities, cooperatives, parents, independent schools, educational charities can help to turn around failing schools or establish better alternatives, they too deserve our support and encouragement. It is no longer good enough for schools with the best results to serve only the most affluent. And we must send out the message to the majority of our citizens who do rely on public services that the era of big government, top-down, take it or leave it monopoly supply is over. Today I've talked about my vision of education, opportunity for every child and freedom for every school and real choice for every parent. Next spring, we will debate these crucial issues together. The year ahead is of massive importance. Our government has clearly lost the confidence of the electorate, lost the confidence of the House of Commons, and finally lost confidence in itself. It's rotting from the head down. But there is a real risk that the country will sleepwalk back into a period of conservative government, not out of enthusiasm, but on the rebound. The Tories say that they would end breakdown Britain. But we in this place haven't forgotten who broke Britain down in the first place. And be in absolutely no doubt, under the Tories, progressive policies would be killed off. Not perhaps by the quick fall of the axe, but by a long, slow process of strangulation. Our job is to offer the country an alternative that is both progressive and radical. Not the radicalism which just betrays a profound conservatism of thought, not back to a better yesterday, but nor forward simply to a paler shade of blue. What Nick Clegg and Vince Cable are crafting is a radicalism that fuses freedom with fairness. The consultants, they've even found a name for it. Not a bad one either, liberalism. Our country deserves a better choice than Cameron or Brown. And the hope for repairing our society now rests to a large extent on the effectiveness, on the imagination, on the devotion to principle, on the courage and the success of this party. Our ambition is to help raise every child from what they are to what they might become. It has long been the great liberal cause, and as Liberal Democrats, we must now rise to this challenge.